All right, shalom and good evening. I am going to do a brief discussion on the non-UCC one. Today is June 16th. Um, and like I said, we've gone over all of the packets now, and so as people work on those, we need to come back and talk about certain things. We will. We'll start going over documents, but we're going to move forward with how you operate a business or whatever it is from the private position, from a non-citizen national. Um, and one of the things that you cannot do is file documents on the public record about your private life. So when people talk about this, they're very kind of all over the place about it because they don't understand what's going on. If you're filing documents in regards to your social security number, then yes, you need to use a UCC filing on a public platform. However, if you're filing documents in regard to your private status, you would need to use a non UCC, and that's non commercial. That's the non and non UCC. The other UCCs are commercial UCCs. Well, it's like universal commercial things, but these are non commercial UCCs. Okay, so this is specifically delineating these out as non commercial, which is really important. So, what you have here is a UCC financial statement. It's in the description. You can take a look at it. Um, so when you file it, the first document you file is a UCC. Then following that, you file a UCC 3. So at the bottom, was that box 6A, it has non-UCC filing. You check that. Now I'll start at the top. At the top of the document, the part that I've added in here where it says the above spaces for filing office use only, well, you have to file it somewhere. Now, this was a question mark in my mind because whenever anyone would talk about this just in general, they wouldn't exactly say how they did it. They would say stuff like, "Oh, I took it to the courthouse and got them to stamp it." Okay, but how? Like, what did you tell them? And so, what I decided or discovered was basically people knew people. When they were doing these processes, they already had people in place to do stuff for them. And so, if you're trying to replicate what they did, you can't because they already had friends on the inside who could get stuff done for them. You know what I mean? They just had to pay a fee. Everybody put up a toll booth, which on my spiritual channel I talk about that all the time. So I had to think about what the ultimate goal was. Like when you file this document or any document, what exactly are you trying to do? And so you're trying to put the public on notice. But in this case, it's a non-commercial, so you're trying to put the non-commercial public on notice. Well, then you have to use a non-commercial entity. So what we did as a part of our tribe is that we set up public posting. So they have a website though, you can go and find like online public posting, but what I didn't like is that there was no verification that your document was posted, which I had a problem with because if for some reason you have to litigate this, you need proof. So what we did was we came up with a solution that discussed both the aspect of being able to public post and also the aspect of being able to keep it private. And verify that it was actually submitted on a certain day at a certain time, plus being able to keep the records. So that's what we do. We have a public posting section in the tribe that we use to public post. But again, if you have some other idea on how to publicly post things, you could try to do whatever. It is what it is. This is just what I came up with because I just knew that other people were paying people who they knew to do stuff for them. And that's fine and well, but that's not accessible to the public. And then you got to pay that person to give you the other person's name so that you can do. That's too much. Like, again, everybody just setting up toll booths. So what we use is we use registered mail numbers. Now, if you're familiar with any posting processes at all, registered mail numbers are frequently used. Okay, so we use registered mail numbers for this. So as you can see on at the top of the document, it's non-UCC official document filing per registered mail number, because the registered mail numbers are basically account numbers. You can use them in multiple ways. The government does not print more than one registered mail number. So that's why if you're trying to get registered mail slips, it's quite difficult because the government only prints one of them. They're one of one. And so that's what we use. We use a registered mail number. Now you'll also see on here I have a round stamp. That's an international stamp. When you go to the post office, you'll have to go inside and get an actual, book of these stamps. If you're going to do a lot of these, most people don't need that many, so they let you buy them one by one. But you'll want an international stamp, a round international stamp. I do believe they're $1.50. I think they're $1.50. They have the daisy ones, and then the Christmas time they have the poinsettias, but they're always round. I need a round stamp. That's the ones that you use for these non-UCC filings. Okay. I printed this out, but I also added text boxes that have the date posted and recorded. That I printed that directly on my document. And here the non-UCC in red at the top, I actually had that printed on a sticker, but since then I print the whole thing out on the document. So I do put that in a different color. And then when you sign it, as you can see, I have my signature on there. It's across the stamp. Usually you want to sign things at a 45-degree angle. Now, in order for this to be valid, you have to remember to put down at the bottom that you are opting yourself into the Stamp Act. So I'll talk about that when we get down to the bottom. And then you put your EIN number, because this is non-commercial. So you're not going to use your social security number. You're going to use your EIN number. On this case, I use the private banking EIN number because that's where, quote unquote, money needs to be routed through. Okay. So for the contact information, email, and all of that, you put that in. Let me talk about the address a little bit. It's really important to have done the estate process before you start doing not a bunch of non-UCCs, because you need to have your general post office address and all of that stuff set up, which you do during the estate process. If you try to put this towards a public address, you're messing up the whole thing. The whole idea is that this is a non-commercial. Most houses, just regular houses with regular numbers, they fall under the commercial um they fall under the commercial banner. And so if you just put your regular address on there, like especially if you do a bunch of these, you are that's just not how you want to operate. You have to prove that you're a, I don't like the word private citizen, but a non-citizen national. You have to prove that. And so if you are on a non-UCC document that you file with some private company, organization that's also a private organization, and you're turning around and using your public regular address, you're not understanding what's going on here. And when people talk about the non-UCC, they don't talk about that part because, again, most people teach things in isolation. So when you're trying to figure out how it all goes together, you can never figure out that, oh, if I do a non-UCC with my commercial address, then that's kind of like negating that they could get me, I could get in trouble if they're trying to find a way to get me in trouble because I'm talking about non-commercial things, when in fact, I'm mixing non-commercial things with commercial things. You can't mix non-commercial things with commercial things. And it's really easy to do so if you're not, again, focusing on what you're trying to accomplish. This is why I say, do the paperwork step by step, get all the stuff taken care of, and then start working on this stuff because it's really easy to get confused. And so you're always having to think, okay, what hat do I have on right now? And if you're not too sure which hat you have on, you could make a mistake. And so just a suggestion. Um, so on here in the debtor's name, it has the all caps name, a UCC Social Security surety for a for-profit organization. Your Social Security number is a for-profit corporation. Okay, it's a commercial for for-profit or for-profit organization. It's a commercial for-profit organization. It's private because your Social Security number is exclusive to you, so it's individualized, but it is for-profit. And it is a surety. That's another thing I learned when I started working on these. I'm like, whoa, it's a surety. Your Social Security number is a surety for all of your debt. So again, if you have your bond on file, then you have something on file to actually back up this surety. That's why you got to do all the steps because if you don't have a bond on file, then you don't have you don't have proof that you have a surety. Even though everyone says this and that, they don't have any proof, just like they don't have a trust indenture. So how can you have a trust? Notice the word trust is not on here. How can you have a trust if you don't have an indenture? I know I have a surety because I put the surety on file. That can't be questions. If somebody asks me, hey, I have a surety on file. You want to see the copy? Because I have a copy of it. I know that it's on file. Here's the numbers. Look them up. See if it was delivered. I know that. But if you don't have a bond on file, you don't have a surety. Okay, they kicked me out. Great. You have to be diligent in describing the non-commercial land as non-commercial. Otherwise, they assume because you are a Social Security surety that you're in commercial status. And so you have to always be opting out. What you're really opting out of is being a commercial entity. I don't think I've ever heard anyone explain it like that, but that is what makes sense. Because really this is about commerce, but it's about you as the commercial vessel as opposed to you trying to engage in commerce. Like it's just crazy. Okay, the city, the state. When you do your zip code, it's okay. So in one of the processes, we learn. I think it's beneficial owner. We learned that you have a commercial address with 999949, and then you have a non-commercial address which is 3 9s and an 8. And so when you're trying to address the non-commercial entity, you use the 3 9s and an 8 at the end of the address, and that is what um, differentiates between you, the commercial entity, and you, the private entity. It's really interesting to me, complicated, but interesting. All right. So country is U.S. and the debtor's name is your all caps name, a UCC surety for a private for profit org, and then the secure party is your banker EIN. So first, middle, last, private bank, estate and trust, first, middle, last, name, individual banker per EIN and your EIN. Okay. And then in this case, I use the same address as my PO box, but I'm using as my general post office box, but I'm changed the mailing address to PO box as opposed to general post office box. So that differentiates on paper that we're talking about the UCC surety that is property of the non-commercial entity versus the person, the private bank or individual banker that is public facing but still property of the private owner. So it's a little, it's a little wordy, but that's the general gist that you're trying to get people to understand. Yes, it may be the same address, but it's not the same. They do this all the time. They don't have a problem doing it to us. But of course, when you try to go back and do it to them, then there's some kind of an issue. So let's talk about the collateral here. This is the paragraph you would put in there to start your UCC. This is not where you would put in your different collateral. That would be on subsequent ones, and you would just list out your collateral at this point. But when you start, you have to first file an initial UCC one, and you use that one to establish the account, basically, for lack of better term, uh, uh, for lack of a better term, you use it to establish the non-commercial UCC account. Okay, so here it says the bailor. Now this goes into what I call it, admiralty. This goes into admiralty. So again, this is why I say to do this after, because this is the reason you have the capacity to do this is your status under admiralty law. This is not done under beneficial owner. This is not done under estate. This one is that now there is a ecclesiastical UCC, but it's not like this. Like that's just something different. This is done under the pretense of admiralty. So if you haven't established your admiralty setup, again, this one of those missing pieces that is if for some reason someone was going to question you, you would have to be able to explain this. So this is done under the authority of admiralty. Okay. So it says the bailor is a vessel exceeding 25 years of age. The Shipping Act, Title 46, USC, Section 57308. And that's another reason why you would want to do this under admiralty, because as a if you try to do it under your estate is not allowed to use codes. So that would get you in trouble. Ecclesiastical doesn't use codes either, so Roman citizenship would not be the answer. And usually, once you do your beneficial owner and your secure creditor, you also don't want to use codes. The only one who can still use codes is admiralty, because some of the shipping laws, all of the shipping laws, are enshrined in code, and not exactly law, because of its commercial in nature. So that's why where your commercial nature comes in is with admiralty. Okay, your commercial life. All right. Title 46 USC Section 57308 mandates bailor may no longer be used for commercial operations. So this is a bailor bailee situation, which you will have to click at the bottom when you do this document. Okay, the bailee is a not-for-profit private entity fully owned by your first dash middle name colon first dash first dash middle last name, and then the second blank or the third blank here is the last name, is in her capacity or his capacity as an Article 4 public American citizen. Bailey claims bailor's non-UCC bonded security claim, and lien stands over all first, middle, last, all caps, United States, state of, and the state your birth certificate was issued in, banks or bonded labor credits. By law, the bailee, as a private, not-for-profit entity, may not own bonds. So the bailee, it cannot own bonds. So when you do get to issuing bonds, do not issue bonds for your private banker. They can't own bonds. Okay, so just keep that in mind. You can't bond your private banker. It doesn't. Again, one of those things that doesn't work. Um, let's see. All collateral trust securities per the Miller Act must have a payment and performance bond to comply with the law. These bonds are brokered with the proceeds transferred to bailee by way of the banker's EIN number. Okay, because the bailor can be bonded and is basically your surety is your bond. It's saying that you are bonded because a surety is a type of bond. So in our case, the bond that we issue, or the bond that we issue is a security bond for debts. It's a debt bond, but the bailor is because the bailor is a living person, or is the property of a living person. They can have a bond, but the private banker is just a pass through entity, so they can't have no bonds. Pass throughs don't get bonds. Okay, it's only, and that's part. I think now that I think about it, I think that's part of the problem with the way the system is set up, because a lot of these individuals, they look like people, but they're really pass through entities, and pass through entities don't get bonds. Um, that's interesting. So now we want to talk about the bottom of the page, which is pretty easy. In 5, you don't have to click anything. In 6, you don't have to 6A, you don't click anything. 6B, you want to click the non-UCC filing. And 7, you click that Bailey Bailor. But I think it really be interesting to when you're doing this, to look at these different relationships and see how they work. And we might talk about that one week, but because they're all different, and sometimes they will use different language to try to confuse you into thinking that you're in one relationship with an entity, but it's really not the case. So that will be really interesting to see. Um, so it says at the bottom, optional filer reference data. I have on here the 14th Amendment because the bailee is a 14th Amendment citizen technically. Then it has PL 78291, ZZ, that's a USC code, or 22 USC section 200A, 15 USC section 162 or 82, 46 USC 735, 73, and what is it? I don't know, 735, looks like 73, 53, I don't know. The 1868 Expatriation Act, USS Section 9, Miller Act, and then I add on here the Stamp Act because that wasn't on the original one. Let me find out what codes are on here in case somebody was really trying to figure it out. That wasn't very helpful. Um, uh, they didn't have the Stamp Act on here when I originally looked at this document from someone. I can't remember. But they were still putting stamps in the corner and signing it. But they did indicate they were using the Stamp Act. So I pulled the Stamp Act and looked at it, and basically what the Stamp Act does is it allows you to assign a value to a document and pay the tax on that document with stamps. And so in the old days, what they would do is if they signed a contract, they would get a stamp and put the stamp on the document and sign over the stamp, like I have on here, proving that they paid the tax. So the fact that they went is, so it's kind of like a private way of ensuring that the taxes are paid. So the government or whoever would assign a certain value to, let's say if you had to submit an application, they would say, okay, this application costs like our tribal applications, they're like a penny. So you put a penny stamp on there, you sign over it, and or on the the rescission of signature document, I think they use a 2-cent stamp. So that's the value that they assign to that document. And so if and the numbers from, I think this is from the 1830s, if I'm not mistaken. They repealed the Stamp Act, see, because what happened was people were doing people were doing bartering. They were doing non-commercial business with the stamps. And so because they were doing non-commercial business with the stamps, the government didn't like that. They wanted to be all in your business, and just like the states, they wanted to be in your business. So instead of someone coming to you and say, "Oh, do you have a contract for that?" and you saying, "Yeah, here's my contract," and you having a contract and signed and they never seen it, now you got to go to your local government or the federal government, whatever, send in a document and pay the tax that way, so that they have copies of your documents. So people would operate with the stamps as a way to get around, or not necessarily get around. That's not a good description. They would operate with the stamps as a method for for privacy, for privacy. So because when you do this non-UCC, this doesn't go to somebody. Like, you only need, this is for your records. This is literally your book of records proving that you have done the work that you said that you did. That's literally what it's for. If oh gosh, it's not on this one. If you have some, for some reason you have to go to court or something like that, you just need proof that you actually thought about this before the person shows up and tries to file a claim against it. Because the whole point of this is, like, for example, if somebody tried to say, yeah, I see that you did this little trust indenture for your person. That's cute and all, but I still own you. I could be like, I have a UCC financing statement here that was done in July of 2024 that says that the again, a commercial entity, which is the private banker, is the bailee for the bailor, who is the Social Security person under the UCC Social Security Trust. They're not going to be able to argue that because they're not going to have any documentation. A lot of these in, entities, industries, whatever, they don't have no documentation for what they say. They're always talking about people doing this and people doing that, but honestly, they have no proof. Oh, is this it? They have no proof that they've actually done anything. Oh no, that's my regular UCC. Hold on, let me see. I'm still looking for it. I know I have it here. I want to read those things I got at the bottom in case someone really needs to know, which is possible. Um, So as you can see, this is an important document. It's, it's not the first on the list of importance, but once you get through the basically the trust indenture for your Social Security person, your Social Security trust, then you can start working on this kind of stuff and pulling your property from the commercial realm, which is public, to the non-commercial realm, which is private. I actually prefer the term commercial and non-commercial. I think that the use of public and private is too confusing. It doesn't really explain what's going on. But when I say I'm not for sale, that's non-commercial. There's no one's gonna be like, what do you mean by private? What is private? What does that mean? When you say it's non-commercial, you immediately understand what's being said. It's like, oh, okay, all right, you don't engage in commercial. Like, they might not know what it means, but you know for sure that it doesn't mean you can buy me. I'm not for sale. This is just what does it say? 14th Amendment, PL 79 291, 22 USC Section 288A, 15 USC Section 1 and 2, 46 USC Section 73 and 573, the 1868 Expatriation Act, USS Section 9, the Miller Act, and the Stamp Act. That's what's in the optional filer referencing data. And so those are the laws that you're opting into. And that is important. I think, I don't know exactly. I'm sure I got this from Patrick Devine and I modified it, but somewhere it has those documents where you can take a look at them. I did look at them at the time, but I did this over a year ago, so I can't remember the stuff off the top of my head. So I don't want to misquote because I certainly could do that. So once you get to this stage, like, this is your basic non-UCC one. Then, like I said, if you have other items that, like for example, I did a silver bond. I put the silver bond on the non-UCC. Like that, the kind of things that don't need to be on public record because they're not public, is what you would use a UCC for. So when I issue people tax credits, I do a non-UCC, because that's how I have, especially depending on where the tax credits come from and all of that. I have all of that stuff documented. And yeah, it's a lot of paperwork and it's a lot of details, and you really don't want to, you don't want to engage in this until you're actually to a point where this makes sense. This is not the kind of stuff that you use to pay bills or anything like that. People, everybody got a different agenda when it comes to this kind of paperwork stuff, and it's fine. People can do whatever they want, but like I always say, um, we try to keep it really simple over here, and non-commercial, outside of the commercial realm. So, any questions?
No, no questions.
Okay. All right. So next week I'm gonna start talking about business and how to do a non-commercial business. It can be done. It's not impossible, but it requires a general, understanding of the difference between commercial and non-commercial. So if I can find some information on that, I'll probably talk about that. Otherwise, I'll just go in to start talking about how to structure your non-commercial business, because it doesn't mean you can't do business. It's just you're doing it from a non-commercial standpoint, and what does that mean, and what does that look like, and how to stay in honor in a non-commercial business. And it's not really that hard. It's really the same as it looks like a regular business on the outside. It's just the engine of the business runs a little bit different. So I'll put the full video up for this so you guys can take a look at it, because I did start rambling on a little bit before people got on here. So peace and blessings, everybody, and I'll see you guys next week.